My parents sold my car without asking to pay for my sister. So I moved out, and what I did next left them shocked. I'm a 25-year-old guy, and for as long as I can remember, I've been the one quietly carrying my family's responsibilities. I don't say that to sound noble, just honest. While most people my age were figuring out who they wanted to be, I was already juggling 2 jobs, trying to keep my head above water while still helping out at home. That's how I eventually saved enough to buy my used car, the first real thing in my life that was mine. I remember sitting in the driver's seat for the first time, the faint smell of old leather, the hum of the engine, my hand shaking around the steering wheel because it felt like freedom, pure, unfiltered freedom. My parents never really acknowledged that feeling. They were too busy doting on my younger sister, Emma, the golden child who could do no wrong. If she skipped chores, it was because she was tired. If she messed up at school, it was because she was still growing. If I did the same, suddenly I was irresponsible, ungrateful, or not setting a good example. It's funny. People talk about fairness as if it's some universal rule. But in my house, fairness never applied to me. Even tiny disagreements somehow turned into situations where I had to bend, apologize, or give something up. Emma just had to pout or whine a little, and my parents would rush to defend her like she was made of glass. I learned early on that peace in the house depended on how quickly I gave in. So when I bought that car, it wasn't just transportation. It was my escape pod, my breathing room, my one place where nobody could comment on how I lived or what I needed. Sometimes I would sit in it for an hour after a shift ended, engine off, streetlights glowing through the windshield, just enjoying the silence that didn't exist inside my home. But even then, in the back of my mind, I knew my parents never really saw my car as mine. They always made comments like, "Everything in this family belongs to the family," little hints that I brushed off. I probably shouldn't have, because I had no idea how far they were willing to go. It all started on a random Tuesday night, right after I got home from a long shift. I walked through the door expecting the usual quiet tension, but instead, I found Emma sitting at the dining table with her laptop open, eyes wide and dramatic, like she was about to deliver some tragic news. Before I could even set my keys down, she blurted out, "I need money, a lot of it." Her voice cracked in that deliberate way she used whenever she wanted sympathy. She explained she'd miscalculated her tuition fees and completely forgotten about the deposit for her new apartment, and now everything was due at once. My parents didn't even hesitate. My mom turned to me with this expectant look, like the solution was obvious. "You'll help her, right?" she asked, as if I didn't already scrape by every month. My dad chimed in, reminding me of how family supports family, which in our house was code for, "You fix what Emma breaks." I tried to stay calm as I told them I couldn't. I was barely managing rent, gas, insurance, basic survival. But the second the words left my mouth, the room shifted. "You're being selfish," my mom snapped, her face pinched with disappointment. My dad shook his head like I'd failed some unspoken test. "And Emma," she immediately burst into tears. "I'll lose everything," she sobbed, clutching her chest. "My life is literally falling apart. You don't even care." It was a performance worthy of an award. A few years ago, it would have worked. I would have drained what little I had to fix her. The morning everything fell apart didn't come with sirens or shouting. It came with silence. I stepped outside, half asleep, and ready to start another long day, when my stomach dropped. The driveway was empty. My car, my one lifeline, my one piece of independence, was gone. At first, I panicked. I assumed it had been towed or stolen, and I felt this sharp, cold fear rush through me. I darted back inside, heart pounding, ready to ask my parents if they'd heard anything during the night. But when I found them in the kitchen, they were casually eating breakfast, like nothing was wrong. My mom didn't even look up when she said, "Oh, don't worry about the car. We sold it." Just like that, like she was announcing the weather. I froze. "You, what?" I asked, my voice cracking. My dad shrugged, saying, "You weren't going to help your sister, so we did what we had to do. Emma's future can't wait." I felt my knees weaken. The room spun. The car was registered entirely in my name. I worked 2 jobs, skipped meals, and ruined my sleep schedule to buy it. And they sold it like it was their spare furniture. I felt physically sick. My hands were shaking, my chest tight, my throat numb. "You had no right," I whispered, but they rolled right over my words. "It's just a car," my mom snapped. "Emma's education is more important than a piece of metal," my dad added. Then Emma walked in, hair perfectly curled, wearing the smug expression she didn't even try to. I don't think I've ever felt anger and heartbreak hit me at the same time, the way it did after they told me they sold my car. I was shaking, my voice cracking, as I tried to explain what they had actually taken from me. Not just transportation, but the years of work behind it. But the moment I raised my voice even a little, my mom leaned back with this irritated sigh and said, "You're being dramatic. It's not that serious." My dad nodded like I was a toddler throwing a tantrum. "You should be proud," he added. "You supported your sister like a real man does." A real man. Funny how their definition only ever applied when it benefited Emma. I tried to argue, to remind them the car was legally mine, bought with my own money, but every point I made was dismissed like I was being petty. And just when I thought it couldn't get any worse, my parents started calling family members, my aunts, uncles, even my grandparents. Suddenly I was getting messages like, "Your sister's lucky to have you." It's so losing my car felt like losing a limb, but losing my job because of it, that shattered something inside me. My workplace was across town, and without a car, there was no realistic way to get there on time. After 3 days of arriving late, sweaty, exhausted, and breathless from speed walking miles in the cold, my manager finally pulled me aside. He wasn't cruel about it. In fact, he looked genuinely guilty when he said, "I can't keep you on like this. I'm sorry." Hearing those words was like being punched in the throat. I walked home numb, the freezing wind slicing across my face, but I barely felt it. The real cold was inside me. When I told my parents, hoping for even a shred of concern, my dad just shrugged. "Well, you'll figure something out," he said, as if I'd misplaced a phone charger. My mom didn't look up from her phone. "You're overthinking," she muttered. "Things happen." And Emma laughed. She actually laughed. "You're being overly sensitive," she smirked. "It's just a job. Just a job. The job that paid my rent, my bills, my food, the life they never helped support. With no steady income, I scrambled for whatever temporary shifts I could find. Dishwashing, unloading trucks, anything. But without a car, every trip was torture. I walked miles in brutal rain, in freezing morning air that made my fingers burn, in blistering heat where sweat stung. There's a strange clarity that comes when you're completely broken. After days of walking miles, nights of collapsing fully clothed on my bed, and a hollow ache growing in my chest, something inside me finally snapped. But not in a chaotic way, in a calm way, a cold, razor-sharp kind of quiet. I woke up one morning, body sore and spirit drained, and realized I was done. Done being their mule. Done being their wallet. Done being the invisible backbone of a family that only noticed me when they needed something. For the first time in my life, I felt a spark of defiance instead of guilt. That's when I remembered the paperwork. They had kept the car sale documents in a drawer in my dad's office, bragging about how organized they were. While they were out, I slipped inside, my heart pounding as I opened file after file until I finally found it. The moment I saw my forged signature, my stomach twisted. But there was also a sick satisfaction. They hadn't just betrayed me emotionally, they'd broken the law, and suddenly, I didn't make some dramatic announcement. I didn't scream or throw things or demand justice. I simply wrote a note, 4 short sentences on a torn sheet of paper, and left it on the kitchen table where they couldn't miss it. "I'm moving out. I'm done being part of your financial chaos. Don't contact me unless it's an emergency. I won't be cleaning up any more messes." Writing it felt like pulling a thorn from my own skin. Quiet, painful, necessary. When I grabbed my bags and stepped outside, the air felt different, lighter, almost sweet. But the silence didn't last long. Within an hour, my phone exploded with notifications. My mom was the first to call, her voice shrill with outrage. "How dare you leave like this, after everything we've done for you?" My dad wasn't any better. "This is irresponsible. You're acting like a child." And then Emma. Of course, Emma. She sent a barrage of texts. "You're seriously ruining my life. How could you abandon us now? You're leaving me to suffer because you're bitter about a car? You're disgusting." I stared at the message thread for a long moment, then blocked her. After everything she'd taken, after everything they'd excused, the guilt they tried to shove onto me simply didn't land anymore. I felt nothing, and that nothing felt like freedom. I packed the last of my things into a rideshare and headed straight to my coworker's place. She opened the door with a warm smile and a simple, "You're safe here." Those words alone nearly brought me to my knees. I moved into the spare room, closed the door, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel watched. I didn't feel judged. I didn't feel owned. That night, lying on a mattress that wasn't mine in a room that didn't smell like resentment, I realized something. The absence of chaos was its own kind of peace. A fragile peace, but peace. And deep down, I knew the storm I was about to unleash would make that peace even sweeter. The morning after I moved out, I walked into the police station with a calmness that didn't feel like mine. My hands were steady as I filled out the report, listing every detail: how the car was registered in my name, how I discovered it missing, how my parents admitted to selling it without permission. When the officer asked if I wanted to proceed formally, I didn't hesitate. "Yes," I said quietly. "I do." Saying those words felt like reclaiming a piece of myself they'd chipped away for years. The next step was contacting the buyer. I expected hostility or avoidance, but instead, he answered immediately and sounded almost relieved. "I figured something was off," he admitted. "Your father barely let me read the paperwork. He rushed everything." When I told him the signatures were forged, he didn't even sound surprised, just annoyed. "I'll cooperate with whatever you need. I don't want to be involved in anything shady." Hearing that was like the universe saying, "You're not crazy. This is real." And real, it became very fast. When investigators compared the signatures on the transfer forms to my actual ID, the difference was blatant. Sloppy copies, wrong slants, wrong loops, not even close. The officer handling my case shook his head and said, "This isn't going to look good for them." Within days, my parents received a call from the authorities. They acted blindsided, furious, and indignant. My mom left a voicemail dripping with outrage. "How dare you involve the police? This was a family matter." My dad followed up with, "You're making a fool of yourself. We can handle this privately." The arrogance in their voices would have made me laugh if the situation weren't so exhausting. But the best reaction came from Emma. I knew things were escalating legally, but I didn't realize just how fast everything would fall apart until the extended family got involved. It started with my aunt calling me, her voice sharp, confused, and furious. "Why didn't you tell us they stole your car?" she demanded. Apparently, my parents had initially spun a whole story about how I generously donated it for Emma's education. But once the truth leaked, through the police inquiry, the buyer's cooperation, and my refusal to stay silent, the family group chats exploded. My parents were suddenly painted not as devoted caregivers, but as thieves who stole from their own son. And honestly, that's exactly what they were. Emma wasn't spared either. Her school contacted her, informing her that because the money used for her tuition came from a fraudulent sale, it had to be returned, or her enrollment would be suspended. I heard this secondhand from a cousin who worked in the same office as one of her advisors. Emma went from flaunting her fresh start to sobbing in bathrooms between classes. The golden child glow was cracking. Then her landlord stepped in. He gave her a final warning: pay the remaining balance or face eviction. Apparently her urgent fees weren't as paid off as she pretended. Now, with the illegal funds frozen, she had nothing to fall back on. That's when my parents started calling nonstop. Not to apologize, not to take accountability, but to beg. "Please, fix this," my dad pleaded in a voicemail. I agreed to meet them, but not because I wanted closure or reconciliation. I met them because the detective handling my case asked for one final confirmation before the next step. So I chose a neutral location, a small cafe near the station, public enough to keep things civil, quiet enough to hear every lie they were about to tell. When I arrived, they were already there, sitting together, rehearsed expressions painted across their faces like a cheap imitation of remorse. My mom was the first to speak. "We're sorry," she said, her voice trembling in that overly performative way she used when she wanted pity. My dad nodded solemnly. "We shouldn't have sold the car without telling you, but you have to understand, we were desperate." Then came the predictable guilt trip. "Family helps family," he added. "You turning this into a legal matter is tearing us apart." They weren't apologizing for stealing from me. They were apologizing for getting caught. Before I could respond, Emma leaned forward, eyes red, but still full of entitlement. "Just withdraw the report," she snapped. "I need that money more than you need some stupid car. My entire future depends on it." There it was. The truth. Raw. The fallout hit them faster than even I expected. Within a week of the confrontation, the buyer received an official notice confirming that the car sale was invalid due to fraud. My parents were ordered to return the full amount immediately. No extensions, no negotiation. Watching them scramble to gather the money they'd so confidently stolen was a strange, conflicting feeling. Part of me still hurt, but another part felt a cold, quiet justice settling into place. They had treated my property like it was disposable. Now the law was treating their excuses the same way. But the real collapse happened with Emma. The moment the tuition office flagged her payment as illegal and refunded it back to the investigation account, she was immediately placed on academic hold. She called me 5 times in a row, crying so hard she could barely breathe. "They're kicking me out," she sobbed in one voicemail. "My life is over because of you." When her landlord learned she couldn't cover the next month's rent, he served her an eviction notice. She went from curated Instagram perfect mornings to sleeping on the living room couch at home again, though home wasn't exactly stable anymore. Extended family stopped by at first, wanting the full story. But once they realized my parents had forged signatures and lied for weeks, they pulled back completely. No more supportive texts, no more family dinners. The shame spread quickly, and I could practically feel the distance growing as relatives quietly blocked or muted them in group chats. Inside their house, things got even uglier. My parents, once an impenetrable team, turned on each other with venom. My dad blamed my mom for initiating the sale. My mom blamed my dad for handling the money. Both blamed Emma for needing it in the first place. The tension that they used to dump on me finally had nowhere to go but inward. And Emma. She didn't stop at voicemails. She texted long apologies, begged to meet, even tried sending voice notes where she whispered, "Please, I have nowhere else to turn." It's strange how life feels when the noise finally stops. A few months after cutting ties, I found a new full-time job, one that paid better, treated me better, and didn't drain the life out of me the way my old one did. I saved carefully, breathed deeply, and for the first time in years, lived without the constant weight of someone else's expectations crushing my shoulders. Eventually, I bought a new car. Not a used one patched together with overtime and exhaustion. An actual, reliable car I signed for with clear hands and a clear conscience. Sitting in that driver's seat, smelling the fresh interior, I felt something I hadn't felt since I was a kid. Safety. My apartment, small, quiet, and entirely mine, became my sanctuary. At night, I'd sit near the window, breathe in the cool air, and realize how different the world felt when you weren't being drained by people who only saw you as a resource. Losing everything forced me to rebuild with intention, with dignity, with a version of myself that wasn't shaped by fear or guilt. I surrounded myself with people who didn't want anything from me, coworkers who respected me, friends who checked in without expecting favors, people who valued boundaries instead of punishing them. I learned how to say no, how to rest, how to exist without apologizing for it. Every now and then, a letter from my parents arrives, handwritten envelopes, always addressed the same way. "Come home, we miss you, we're sorry, family should stick together." I never respond. I don't throw them away either. I keep them in a drawer as a reminder of how far I've climbed from the version of myself who once believed that love meant sacrificing everything. And Emma, she hasn't reached out again. Maybe she finally understands the cost of using people until they break. My final message to them isn't written in a letter or spoken in some dramatic confrontation. It's in the life I built without them, the peace they never gave me, the freedom they never allowed. Leaving wasn't revenge, it was healing. And healing was the best revenge I ever could have chosen.